We'll call the board meeting together at the April 17th special session. Join me in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comments. Anybody here today that would like to come to the board on a topic that's not on the agenda today? And try to limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Dennis
State your name.
Jantz,
I'm sorry.
8825 Appaloosa Drive in Cologne. Chairman Digler and County Commissioners, I have two questions that I'd like to answer. First, with all the solar sites that are currently operating, under construction, or one being proposed, who is in charge to make sure the CUP is followed to the letter and the solar sites are completed to their CUP requirements and drawings? Is this land management group or county? With the 9 to 11 sites around, are there enough people on staff to follow up on these sites? Who actually signs off on the final paperwork that the site has met all requirements and when? My second question is, who's liable if the site does not follow through on their requirements after 2 years? An example would be opacity, since the solar companies have 2 years to meet their statute. If after that time the site does not meet the 50% opacity statute, is Carver County open to a lawsuit by a landowner or resident? I just want to make sure that as a resident for over 26 years and a Carver County taxpayer, that we do not open ourselves up to a lawsuit for millions of dollars that could have been avoided and raise my taxes. If I can get a written response to this, I would appreciate it. I have this in writing, so I can hand it to the clerk.
Thank you. Please hand it to Administrator Hemsey.
Thank you.
And somebody will be hopefully following up on that. The only reason I let that go, I mean, obviously we have solar gardens on the agenda for today, but those were general comments for all solar gardens that you were anticipating. So thank you very much for those comments. Yes.
Good morning. I'm Dan Cook, 7625 Roots Lake Road, Waconia. I'm here to update you on the Roots Lake Solar Garden construction, CUP PZ201-60032, and I do have written stuff for you guys so you don't have to take notes too detailed. Executive summary for you guys. I last updated you, if you remember, in August. The neighborhood also met Steve to get on the same page with him in December. And I'm here for this update for two reasons. One, to go on record that the CUP conditions still have not been met, number one. Number two, remind you that the burden of these solar gardens as far as policing to make sure these CUPs are followed, that policing is left to the neighborhood. So, since our last chat, the power was turned on in January. A lot of people not of Carver County are now making money. Greenmark, the CUP originator, flipped it to a company, New Energy, in Annapolis, Maryland. New Energy, in turn, hired Conti, a New Jersey firm, to build it, and American Electric Power of Ohio to run it. They all made their money. Meanwhile, the neighbors having to live with this aren't making money. They are policing this. Resolved since our last update, numerous calls were made to Excel Energy. You probably all got letters on this. Excel finally admitted there wasn't due diligence during the construction, and they paid a penalty to the neighborhood for all the power outages. Second, we finally got the construction equipment removed from the property after a lot of calls. Third, with the help of staff and a lot of tenacious calls from the neighbors, we got Excel and the engineering firm to follow the CUP and reduce the number of unsightly connection poles from 11 to 2. The point of all this is a lot of work is being done by the neighborhood, to deal with this CUP you guys voted in. Still to resolve, and then I'm done. A formal handoff never occurred when they flipped the power on like was promised. A follow-up stray voltage test on the 2 feedlots has not taken place since the power's been on. Third, we asked for a paper trail on what happened to the contaminated soil on that property. We don't have that yet. The biggest issue remaining, gang, is an issue in all these solar gardens. The screening is a mess yet. It's non-existent basically in the south. Part of the west, 0 screening, and the east, 0 screening. The screening we do have to the north, trees on a tall, narrow berm, that's going to be become a problem in the heat of the summer when they don't water it and all the trees die. Okay? Carver County still also needs to validate the as-built construction to make sure it conforms to the water requirements the county set forth. We're working with Kristen Larson on that. And finally, plans for seeding pollinator-friendly plantings, along with any weed control plans. The neighborhood hasn't seen those yet either. So that's it. So here's what I'd like to leave you with. The neighborhood has to devote a lot of manpower managing a site we didn't want. For future solar garden votes, please remember, your vote just takes a minute, but the management of these complex multi-owner, and I'll repeat, multi-owner, there are a lot of people pointing fingers at each other we have to deal with. Take a lot of hours by neighbors. Consider the neighbors your collateral damage on all this stuff, guys. These gardens are going to be your legacy. They're probably going to be obsolete in 2 years, and you guys helped put them in. Do you really want to vote more of them in? Thank you. Who gets this?
Here you go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hemsey. Thank you very much.
Diane Deering, 8245 Quass Avenue. Chairman Degler and Commissioners, I am just here to suggest that has been brought up to you in the past of putting a moratorium on all these solar gardens. All these COPs that are happening in Carver County, it seems like the vote is going on regarding the ordinances. If our ordinance are subjective to interpretation, then I believe you need to amend these ordinances to be more specific so everyone can come to a conclusion on exactly what should be accepted and what isn't accepted instead of being so subjective. So again, I truly think a moratorium would be a very smart decision to do in Carver County regarding these solar arrays. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll continue on. Is there a new employee introduction? Yep. New employee introduction, Mr. Paul Moline. Water manager.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Here today to introduce our new water resource technician, Jessica Norby. She goes by Jess. We had a vacancy in this position last fall, and we're finally filling and hiring this spot. And Jess's primary responsibility, once we thaw out, is to go out and sample lakes. If you would believe it, this is supposed to be our first week of lake sampling. So
Good luck with that.
yeah, we'll go chop some ice out there. So I'm gonna introduce Jess.
Jess, introduce yourself, say a few words.
Hi, I'm Jess. I grew up in Chaska, actually. Graduated from Chaska High School in 2010. I was actually really good friends with Ellen Degler.
I thought I recognized that name, and now I put a face together. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So we were really good friends. I played on the varsity soccer and lacrosse teams. I ended up going to play Division II lacrosse in Colorado at Fort Lewis College, where I got my undergraduate in environmental geology and a minor in chemistry. And then I went on to get my master's degree from the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, in water resource science. And I recently moved home. I now live in Carver. So yeah, downtown, right outside of downtown Chaska. I have a 6-year-old border collie mix. We are frequents of the Levee Trail. If you ever go down that way, you'll probably see me. So yeah.
Well, welcome, Jess. What we do usually is come around and shake hands, introduce yourself personally.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Yep.
Can't wait to tell Alan.
With that, we'll move on with the agenda. Item number 2, the agenda review and adoption. Is there a
Move approval of the agenda as presented, Mr. Chair.
motion by Commissioner Ishii, seconded by Commissioner Workman? Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair?
Item number 3 is the
Mr. Chair?
approval.
Mr. Chair, yeah.
Excuse me, I think we had one more new employee,
Did I?
page 2.
Page
Yep,
2.
top of
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane, she's keeping us in line.
Thank you, Diane.
Actually, you must be psycho, Mr. Chair, because there has been a mix-up. We were supposed to introduce our new planner, but they were under the assumption it was a 4 o'clock meeting, so we're going to have to reschedule. She's doing great work already, though, Angie Stinson. And she's actually at the Met Council right now at a
So this introduction isn't going to happen.
no, so you were good. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Lyndon. Thank you, Lyndon.
Ever to Met
Make me look good even when I'm not, so thank you. We will continue on. Approval of the minutes from the April 3rd special session. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move approval, Mr. Chair. Second, Mr. Chairman.
By Commissioner Lynch, seconded by Commissioner Maluchnik. Any discussion on the minutes of the April 13th special session? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, community announcements. Does there anybody have a community announcement they'd like to share with the public? Commissioner Lynch.
If I could, it's April 17th, and I'm sure we've all been enjoying this special 15 inches of snow we just received. And we're supposed to have another couple inches tomorrow, so we can enjoy that, but I just want to cheer everyone up. There is an end at the site. It's supposed to be 60 degrees by next week, so.
Be thankful for the little things in life.
Correct.
Thank you. Just want to remind everybody, the public health, county public health kind of reminded us that April 21st through the 28th is National Infant Immunization Week. They're strongly encouraging anybody with infants, age 6 to 18, to get your children immunized. There will be a free immunization clinic held April 23rd from 3 to 5 here at the County Government Center, and again on the 25th from 8:30 to 10:30. And if by chance your insurance doesn't cover it, don't worry, it's free for those special cases. So get your children, if it's your will, get your children immunized. Any last community announcements? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda today, I'll just review a few of the highlights. There's a charitable gambling permit. There's a temporary liquor license. There's a SSTS direct discharge program, a resolution to receive state bond funds, a resolution in support of mental health bonding, a contract for the Steiner Ketting Mental Wellness Facility, an agreement for right-of-way acquisition for Highway 41, the Health Department FTE changes, and then we have our usual abatements and commissioner warrants. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Maluchnik, seconded by Commissioner Ishii. Any discussion on the consent agenda? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to item number 6, managing the challenges and opportunities resulting from growth and development. 6.1 is the USS King Solar LLC Large Solar Energy System. With that, Mr. Steve Just. Our department manager will kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the King Solar Site, and it's located in section 21 of Waconia Township. It's a 1 megawatt proposed facility. It would encompass approximately 9 acres of the 80-acre parcel. Pursuant to the board's direction on April 3rd, an order for approval has been prepared for your consideration. Regarding the landscaping plan, the applicants have continued to work with the township. They did attend the township meeting last night and agreed to the 15-foot spacing versus the 20-foot spacing of the Black Hill spruce that was discussed at the last meeting. I do have the most recent landscaping plan that will need to be modified in approximately 4 different areas.
Push the screen down. Oh, here
There we
I'll
go.
take care of it.
And our monitors.
Oh, and turn our monitors on. Thank you.
So I'll let the applicant update the board on the meeting last night. Apparently the township did approve the 15-foot spacing. I've highlighted a few areas, the reference to 20-foot typical. The number of trees estimated to be 190, of course, that number will go up significantly. And then the 20-foot average as well, and the date of the landscaping plan, April 9th, would have to be the 17th. So with that, we're looking for a motion to adopt attached findings of fact and issue order PZ 2017-0025 for the approval of the conditional use permit.
Well, thank you. With that, we'll turn it over to the applicants. Again, introduce yourself so we have names to go with. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my name is Peter Schmidt. I'm a project developer from US Solar.
Good morning, Reed Richardson.
Morning, Ross Abbey with US Solar.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, good morning. Thank you for holding another special session for us. I know you've seen a lot of us. So to Commissioner Lynch's point, supposed to start beach volleyball tomorrow. I'm not sure that's quite going to happen with this weather, but I'm glad that the roads have been clear here in Carver County and that we can get to and from township meetings and county board meetings. So I appreciate everyone's work on that and staying safe. Keeping things brief this morning, as Steve almost stole my thunder for, we were at the township meeting last night to discuss spacing of trees. As you might remember from last time, Commissioner Ishii had recommended 20-foot spacing, or at least in his experience, 20-foot spacing had been adequate, and we had created this initial landscaping plan based on that. During our time last night at the township meeting, particularly with a lot of input from Mr. Hoopenbecker, who had done a lot of research on this, we agreed to move to 15-foot spacing between linear feet both sideways and between the rows, with Black Hill spruce, no replacements, and 6-foot minimum planting, B&B. So with that, there was some other discussion beyond that, but that was for the landscape plan specifically, and it was approved 2-to-1, which was the last remaining component that was directed by this group for us to follow up on from the last meeting. So everything else, again, has stayed the same. We did offer, I guess, one other caveat. We did offer $800 to up to 3 neighbors, which is different than the 1 neighbor we had last time. So that was also improved from last time, where you would also, again, directed staff to draft an order for approval. So with that, again, I want to thank everyone for their work on this. This has been a 9-month process, and we're excited to move on, and we're respectfully requesting that you approve the CUP. Thank you.
Please.
Mr. Chair, and for clarity, we will be submitting today this updated landscape plan that changes the 20-foot tip and the reference to 20 feet to 15 feet, and updating the date to today. So we'll get that submitted later today. Thank you.
Anything else? Any questions by the board to the staff? We've heard comments from the public numerous times. If anybody has something that we have not heard, I'd be willing to take it.
And the township, Lawrence.
And the township, I'm sorry, yes. We'll take the residents first, and finish it up with the township.
Dennis Chance again. I've reviewed their CUP that was printed, and I have a couple of comments and questions. On item number 9, they're talking about having their solar panels at 10 foot tall. No question there. And they're talking about having a 8-foot slatted fence around it. No problem there. Then they say it's going to be 100% opacity. You have an 8-foot fence and 10 high-foot solar panel. How do you get to 100%? Question 1. Question 2 is in regards to item 11 on their thing, which says after it's up and running, they'll have 1 quarterly site visit, 1 vehicle to authorize employees and such. They are planning on having approximately 10 beehives. I have 4 beehives on my property. My guys come every 2 to 4 weeks to check on the bees. Are the Bolton bee people not going to come check on the bees and the habitat and things? And how are they going to be doing that when they state right in here they're only going to have 1 quarterly visit? And being a beekeeper, I can guarantee you they're not going to be working on the equipment when the beekeepers are there. Another question. Finally, there was a question about the decommissioning fund. With all these additions with the trees and with the movement of dirt, I feel that the decommissioning fund is underfunded. I know Lauren Huppenbecker has gone through a list, and I have that list here, and he's come up with approximately $225,000 in decommissioning funds compared to their offering of $25,000. I feel that the amount that's listed on here is grossly under, and I respectfully request that that be increased to handle any situations that might occur 25 years from now.
Well, thank you. I'll ask these 3 questions. I'll start with the first one. 100% opacity, how does that compare with the 15-foot or 10-foot high panels and the 8-foot high fence?
Mr. Chairman, the code references opacity as it relates to the screening. So the slatted fence solves that already. So the additional double row of screening, just adds on top of a fully opaque fence already.
And I'm just looking over to staff, and that's usually what has that been the practice of the counties in the past?
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, the screening standard is 6 to 8 feet in height with 50% opacity in 2 growing seasons. In this case, they're offering the slatted fence, which is opaque, with the beautification or the additional that should also provide screening versus just landscaping in front of the opaque fence. But the point is the fence is 8 feet high, which is the higher end of the screening requirements.
So it does meet our requirements in that alone? So,
correct.
Thank you. The second thing is, how do the bees, the maintenance of the bees if how does that fit in with the number of trips to the site?
Mr. Chair, if there were active bee, if it's Bolton bees or another honey farmer, that activity would be happening outside of our fence line. It would not be, I can't tell you how many times they would go there, but what I can tell you is that what we've put in our conditional use permit application about how many times we will be on site maintaining the solar facility as part of this CUP is accurate.
So just to let me understand, the bees would not be enclosed in the fence. They would be outside the fence.
That's not correct.
This is actually something so Bolton has requested to put it inside of our fence just for protection from anyone coming in and taking the hives. It's actually becoming a common practice is people stealing hives. Mm-hmm. So the fence is something we're negotiating where we would allow them access to it, but either way, their employees they're not working on the solar array at all. They're working specifically on the beehives. Our contract with Bolton is going to be spreading out hives among our sites throughout Carver County, so it depends which site has more, which has fewer. We're also trying to work up with local apiary groups to see if we could bring them in. So the hives would be just inside the fence, but they're not doing any work on the panels
So I
themselves.
just want to look over at our staff again. Do we have to change anything on the conditions or the things as far as how many times the site is going to be visited?
We could, I mean, the finding number 11, which is just a reference to their application, talks about traffic to the site would include 1 quarterly visit, 1 vehicle with approximately 2 authorized employees. So I think it's a good point that if they're going to be doing some agricultural activities, obviously they're going to be accessing the field when they're farming. The bee activity as an agricultural activity probably should be referenced in here. They presented that at length, obviously, over the many months, so I don't think anybody didn't realize that there'd be some activity, but we could certainly add to that sentence, or add a sentence that the beekeeping activities would generate some additional traffic.
Thank you. And the last part of the decommissioning, what role does the county have in negotiating the decommissioning between the landowner and the solar company?
None.
Again, this is a fairly lengthy topic that we've gone through. I guess the county has viewed ourselves, or the role of a land use, as a secondary obligee. And so the point was that if everybody walked away from the site, you'd still have the land value. We certainly have the ability to work with the attorney's office if it got to that point, but I think my impression is that it's been decided that it's the landowner's responsibility, and ultimately the land value speaks for itself. As far as if everybody walked away from it, it'd be very unlikely that the county taxpayers would be obligated or have any risk.
Well, thank you very much. Any other comments? Else we'll have to move on.
Nope, that's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Mark Free, 8955 Appaloosa Circle. I have 2 items that I thought about this morning, and it has to do with the construction phase of this project. And I hope you consider this, because I'm kind of looking out for our township at this point. First of all, I live back on a cul-de-sac, and anytime a truck, even a grader, comes back through there, they have a hard time making that circle. And anytime a semi comes through there, they tear up our lane, our lawn and stuff in the circle. And I'd like to see something provided that that traffic, even if you have signs up there, I know there's going to be one of those trucks coming in through there and tearing up that spot. I also wonder where these trucks are going to be parking as they're waiting to get into the site. It's either going to be Appaloosa Circle or Quaz, both township roads. If they're off on the edges of those roads, on the berms, it's going to tear those up. Township's going to have the cost to do that repair work on there, and there's no provisions in this CUP to compensate the township for those particular costs that they'll incur.
I think signage could easily be put up. I'll have to agree with, have to check with the township to make sure that they're applicable to that signage could be put up. This is not for construction vehicles. We can't stop anybody from using a public road. That, excuse me, all of a sudden, excuse me. Obviously, UPS trucks come in our driveway all the time, and it's just a wrong turn. So we can't stop vehicles from, but construction vehicles, that signage can be, talked with the township and make sure that signage is available.
I think that'll help, but I guarantee somebody's going to come down in there.
We can't stop that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Rochelle Fedig, 12525 County Road 32, Waconia. My information today is just very simple. I am on the east side of the property, and I am looking to have be considered again to have a tree allowance as well. I know that I was on that listing previously, and I'd like to be considered for that, my entire east property line. We'll see this structure, and so that's what I would look to have considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Good morning, Linda Wachholz, 12580 County Road 32. I have no hard data other than this is really hard data for us to swallow. We have, and it pertains to property value. We have quietly been marketing our property for a year. We didn't put it on the active market due to the fact that our son was deployed and asked if we could wait until he was home so he could come home one more time. He is now home. We have gone back to 2 serious interested parties. One party that wanted to go forth, we had to certainly disclose what was going on, and guess what? They walked away last week. So they're not interested in our property no matter what the price. We're going to probably have to sell it for less than what would have been fair market value. Again, not hard data, but it's hard data to us. We are on the north side of this property. We do have our own screening in the fact that we have a mature, overgrown hedge because we don't want to look at the traffic, but would also like to be considered for some additional screening. Our hedge is dying. And looking out our front yard, just kitty corner, we're going to be looking at it, and a few trees would be really nice. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Nancy Toole, 8850 County Road 51, and my husband Tim was unable to attend today because he's traveling out of state. We are the people that live on the hill above the property that's being proposed as part of the solar project. And we have emailed and reached out by voicemail to all of 5 of the commissioners over the last week or so, and I do want to thank both Commissioner Degler and Maluchnik. Spoke with one or both of us, and I appreciate the time that you took to do so. As commissioners, you have 2 really strong primary duties: represent your constituents and really look for what is the overall best interest of Carver County. And when you do that, you have to avoid making decisions that could be potentially harmful or liabilities for the county itself. The requirements for the application are there for a reason. It's criteria set for you as commissioners to evaluate whether a proposed project such as U.S. Solar's King project will either be a future asset to the county or a future liability. Several of you have mentioned in the meeting that we had last time, 2 weeks ago, that you've been advised by your counsel that you need to vote for the motion even though you have maybe some personal misgivings. It appears to me that maybe your counsel or your staff is really just looking at the short term, not at the long-term potential liability that could be a result from the project. So I'd like to focus on those potential future liabilities. And I want us to actually just start by really focusing on what we know to be true versus what we know or don't know, and being completely honest. That would hopefully include U.S. Solar. And here are the things we absolutely do know. We do know that this project is being placed in a dense residential area, and that there are adjacent neighbors on all 4 sides of this project. We know that the ordinance were developed to help protect neighborhoods such as ours from any of side effects of these types of commercial businesses. We know that the solar farm itself is now going to be placed after several proposed sites at the highest elevation in the field, making it more prominent and reducing the likelihood that the screening ordinance of 50% opacity in 2 years will ever become to fruition. It is the highest side of the field now that it's been placed in. We know there absolutely will be stray voltage. What we don't know is what is the impact on humans and other animals besides dairy cows. Again, with such proximity, as we have more long-term, sufficient, conclusive research about that, that is, I think, a significant potential liability on the part of the county. We know that our current property values have been increasing in a very positive trend line since the recession. And common sense would say that the fear factor, and we just heard testimony to that effect, will affect the property values of the properties that are in the neighborhood, hurting our attempt to resell those properties. A quick check with your local realtor would absolutely give you the information you need on this, and some study from some other place in the United States doesn't look at local market impact. As it specifically pertains to our property, the one that's on the hill, we know we will never have any type of screening from the elevation of our home. Nothing will be sufficient from any of the proposed sites. We know there will be glare. Now, we don't know how much. We know there's glare ordinance for a reason. That's because there will be glare. This could constitute a liability from the driveway. We face directly into that field. Our driveway goes this and goes down and around onto County Road 51, and glare could be a potential issue. And finally, we believe our property will be most significantly impacted because there won't be any way to have any type of screening that will prevent the, that will be aesthetically pleasing in terms of our property. We know that U.S. Solar recognizes some of these issues because they have included 3 homes, including ours, with an $800 allowance, which to us says that they're recognizing that they can't fully screen and that there could be some of these liabilities, and that's why they're offering an allowance. When you consider all of this and you know these potential liabilities, it seems clear that to us that you should deny the motion. However, I would like to just say one final thing. If you feel like you cannot deny the motion, I would ask for you to delay the vote today for one more meeting, for one very important reason. We did not specifically reach out to U.S. Solar to discuss our individual property, and this is our fault, and I'll take responsibility for this, my husband and I, because we thought when we heard the commissioners talking at the last meeting that you actually were saying work with the township and the local residents to work out agreement on screening and landscaping. I went to the township meeting last night assuming that I would have a chance to speak for our unique situation with being placed on the hill, and that would be part of the recommendation that would come back from the township. Clearly, I was told by the township board that was not the case, that their recommendation was to just work at the screening that was around the solar field, not make any recommendations on what they should do in terms of helping the neighborhood. So with that, I believe there are other property owners, I talked to one of them last night, who had that same impression. And so in order to mitigate these impacts that we're talking about, it will be necessary, we've done some preliminary work on this, for us to place on our own property large mature trees like blue spruce or Black Hill spruce to screen our property from the solar farm, since nothing that they're going to do would have that impact. Our preliminary estimate is in the range of $15,000 for mature trees. I personally believe that could be conservative. That was just in some phone calls. So $800 as an allowance is not in any way sufficient. If U.S. Solar wants to place solar projects in residential areas such as ours, they should be willing to pay the true cost of screening, and that should not be the obligation that's placed on residents to take that cost on because of a commercial property. I am asking for more time for us to negotiate an agreement with U.S. Solar for an allowance higher than $800. so the application can be amended appropriately before it is voted on. I also believe there are other neighbors who have similar requests. We heard one of them as well. Once a vote occurs, the reality is that there's no incentive for U.S. Solar to work with individual neighbors on their unique situation. So finally, again, I'd appreciate it if you would actually just vote no and deny the motion, but at a minimum, delay the vote with an agreement in direction to U.S. Solar that they work with individual property owners to resolve their individual concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I've been trying to be very lenient. I've given you lots of time, so we'll take that under consideration. Thank you.
Jody Flatto, 8805 Appaloosa Circle. Just a couple of things, kind of piggybacking on a lot of things that Nancy hit. For and foremost, I want you to deny it. We think we've given you more than valid reasons to do that. That's our first choice. If you're not going to deny it, there are a couple things, like as Nancy had just mentioned, that I as well thought at the township meeting last night that we could provide input into other screening pieces, but they only wanted to discuss the spacing of the Black Hill spruce. As ourselves, Flatbows, Barlows, who are across the circle from us, and Fedigs, as Rochelle has mentioned, and Wackles directly across the street. I feel that all four of us should be included with the other three in the allowance. Again, the amount of it is, I feel, grossly insufficient. But if there is an allowance given, I think that all of us, there'd be 7 of us then included in that. How our house sits, the solar panels will be the view out our family room picture window. So that's why I feel it's justified in asking to be included in that allowance. And I had the same sentiment as Nancy. If U.S. Solar is going to put this energy plant in the middle of a residential neighborhood, they need to expect to pay more for screening than they ever have in any other project. That's the consequence of putting it there. If they can't afford it, they should find a different spot for it. A couple other things. The mention that being able to participate in the stray voltage, and they're wanting the neighbors to contact them. I don't think that burden should be put on us. They should contact us to be included in that stray voltage condition if we want that looked at. I agree with Nancy that if there should be a delay. I think there's a lot of details that even in the findings of fact that the staff has drafted, they mentioned in a couple of the points that if there's inconsistencies between previous submitted versions, that the most recent would prevail. I would love for us all to get the latest version of that CUP application because I've seen so many versions, I'm not sure which one is the one that's being voted on, as well as the plat for the landscaping pieces. It'd be nice for everyone to get looking at the same document so we all know this is the latest version, this is what's going through, and then make your decision off of that. If you don't do that, in my mind, that's like signing a contract without knowing all the details, which is not smart business. I think that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Township official, Mr. Hurtenbecker.
I'm Lauren Hippenbecker, representing Waconia Township. On the decommissioning, I've talked to you about this before, but I think it needs to be revisited, that the decommissioning should be quite a bit higher than it is. And if you want to talk to me in person, I've talked to some of you individually, but I really think you should take another look at the decommissioning because I don't think it's sufficient. As far as the trees, we got that resolved last night, but the people that were originally in the $800 agreement for money, I think should still be in there because this solar garden is being built on a hill with the fence down below. So we've got 11 foot of solar garden above the fence. If you're standing on the road, you're gonna see 11 feet of solar garden above this 8-foot fence, which is gonna take at least 14 years before the trees grow up. So you get about half opacity above that. You probably have 40%. So I think these people should be paid some money to take care of part of that in their yard. Top of the hill is at 1,009 feet, bottom of the fence is at 998. And when you add the fence and then you put the solar panel on top, it puts you at 11 feet above the fence, which I don't think is really sufficient. It's gonna take a long time. And then about the roads, I know that the township is the road authority only for township roads. But Appaloosa Drive and Quaz Avenue are township roads. So we need to get some signage or something up there to keep them trucks off of them roads, or there should be some liability for them.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Any questions?
Any questions for the township? I want to thank the township for taking the extra time and meeting with the residents and the applicant to work some of these details out, so.
Well, I hope so.
Thank you very much, yes. Applicants, you've heard a few of the concerns. Do you have anything to add? And then I'll open it up to the board if the board has any questions for you. But I'll open up to you first. Any response at this point?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Commissioners, thank you. These concerns have been discussed at previous meetings, and we feel that we've provided adequate responses throughout the way. There were some statements that were suggested as facts, but without data, that there will be glare, there will be this, that we recognize we don't fully screen. I'm telling you for certain that we do recognize that we are meeting and exceeding the screening requirements of the code. So the fence accomplishes that, more than accomplishes that by itself. We're doing not one but 2 rows of trees. That is above and beyond by far the requirements of the code. In addition to that, after last board meeting, we were asked if we would extend the $800 to more people. We've extended it out to 3 people. And we think that it is, again, significantly above and beyond the requirements of the code. And I think with that, we would choose to turn it over to any questions from the board.
Any questions from the board? Commissioner Lynch.
Excuse me, how would you keep the construction traffic off of the township road? No. Are you gonna have signing, you're gonna have is there gonna be signing, there's gonna be a flag man, whatever, but that's a very legitimate concern about the construction traffic on the township road.
Mr. Commissioner, our standard practice would be to have a driveway that has signage for delivery, for safety, pointing everyone to use the driveway that we build. We have no intention of utilizing other roads or Appaloosa or Quasset.
No, it's not the intention, it's just the accident, because we've been down this road before where it's unintended consequence that someone took the wrong turn. So we need to have some kind of stopgap measure in place to make sure that they're on and I'm sure you want them to be on, because it's a lot less headache for you. But if you can get them on there and think of some, and we can even work with staff to make sure that they would obviously go to that one, because you don't want them on Appaloosa. What about the tree allowance for the fettings, the wall coats, and the tools they do sit up and they're very high and they have a unique view of it, and you graciously offered them $800, but obviously for them, they're gonna need more than $800 to screen properly. And I know you're already screening, but they're gonna have the glare, and I think she has a very valid point. When she being elevated and looking down, would you be interested in including the other residents, even the 7, or you're pretty much stuck on the 3 and increasing the tools allowance?
Mr. Commissioner, I do want to touch on one comment about the glare. And this is unfortunately being taken as fact that there will be glare. Again, we've talked about this in the past, about the level of glare. Again, it's referred to as albedo, and solar panels, specifically photovoltaic solar panels, not mirrors or concentrated solar or all the other things that get considered solar, do not cause glare. They cause less glare than water, than snow, than wet grass, than a lot of things. So I don't think this is a scenario where someone, a neighbor, must do something or is being forced into doing something. Because if it were, I think that would be directly considered in an ordinance. Again, we meet or exceed the ordinance, and so I guess I'm just not sure what the intent is of having us plant several hundred trees when it's already known that is more than what's required of the ordinance, and then on top of planting several hundred trees, planting more trees elsewhere, not that aren't on our property. So we have offered, as was requested, for up to 3 properties, not this property, but 3 additional properties to receive that allowance.
But you wouldn't be interested in increasing the tools or addressing other ones, the other potential 4?
If that were put forth in your motion to approve, Commissioner Lynch, I think that we would not protest.
What about the potential for the stray voltage? How is that going to be tested? Maybe this is a question for Steve or for Rita, I'm not sure, but they had another good point about how do they request to have it, or are you just going to come and contact everyone for potential of testing for the stray voltage?
Mr. Richardson.
Mr. Commissioner, the stray voltage, as I recall, I'm trying to recall the proposed condition would be if there is a livestock owner within a certain distance, they can request that we provide stray voltage testing before and after. That would not be us, U.S. Solar, doing it. That would be us working with the landowner to have a consultant. We've put forth a gentleman named Jerry Lush from Stray Voltage Consulting, who's worked on over 400 dairies, who would be coming in and consulting with that livestock owner.
Just while Mr. Lynch is thinking, I read that condition too, and I was kind of struck, hey, whose responsibility is it? But I can understand, how would the company know who's putting in a livestock facility, who has the livestock? So it would make sense if I were a livestock person that's going to expand or considering a livestock, I would contact you. It's not that you have to go out every 6 months and contact everybody else to see if they are considering livestock. But I think the distance was half mile, within the radius of a half mile. I think that's what was. Mr. Lynch, anything else at this point?
No, not this time.
Commissioner Mluchnik?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, no, I thought I saw you, okay. Mr.
I have no questions, no.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Workman, you have anything at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to weave the comments from the residents together here. It seems when somebody from Ruts Lake tells the board that none of what we're talking about and trying to lay out with these folks gets checked on. It seems a little bit like an act of futility. Is there a problem out at Ruts Lake? Has the stray voltage been measured? Is the opacity been taken care of? It doesn't sound like any of this has been taken care of. And so I think somebody asked, do we have the staff to take care of this? Once this gets approved and out the door, the county board isn't doing a lot of checking up on it, so all I know, these guys are gonna flip it like any other outfit has. The out-of-state construction workers move in, take care of it, start doing stuff. They don't know about driving on a gravel cul-de-sac in a township. So it just seems, it seems like we're kind of putting this stuff together, and then we've got so much going on, I'm not sure that everybody is getting taken care of. But, you know, I read the Star Tribune this morning here after the snowstorm. 570 Minneapolis people got their cars towed. St. Paul, none.
Exactly.
It seems like they got something going on in St. Paul where they've heard from people that said, you know, we live here, we don't have anywhere to park our car, so why are you, I know these tows are incredibly expensive. Hundreds, if not $300 a tow, impound fees, etc. I can't imagine one person who gets towed is delighted. I think in my day I did get one of those. I think I'm still mad. But if I was running Minneapolis and I knew this was occurring and I was the mayor or a city council member, I wonder why do we have a policy that beats on, in many cases, folks who can't afford the tow. And I'm sort of thinking that this way. 100% of neighbors don't want you guys near their house. 100% of our constituents out there are opposed. They might be Democrats, they might be Republicans, independents, or communists. They don't want to live by this stuff. And I'm kind of scratching my head. Why are we going to such lengths? How did this begin and start that we're subjecting our residents to something that 100% of them don't want? I'm in the housing market right now. I'm probably better educated than most buyers because we all know people who move in next to a railroad track and then scream that there's a train going on it. I am not that person, but I'm telling you, I wouldn't want to live by this, and if I had the opportunity to not buy near this, I wouldn't buy. Because I'm moving to the country. So it's an hypothetical, I guess. Why are we doing this? And if we are going to do it for some magnanimous reason about renewable energy, then we need to make sure the residents, every single one of them, is protected. And surely a solar garden shouldn't be allowed on a site where the 50% opacity can't be obtained in a reasonable amount of time. Why would we do that? Let's put it on a hill. We'll never be able to block it from anybody's view. I don't think we're actually meeting that part of our ordinance. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm scratching my head. These are the people we work for. We should be taking much better care of them. And we should be 200% more than that is required. We should be doing for them. And so, not a question, but a very big scratching of the head on how we arrived here and why we continue to do this to all the people who don't want to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Commissioner, I gave you the lenience as I gave everybody else. I heard some questions, but yet you didn't really phrase it as a question, and I'm gonna kind of turn it over to staff. It starts with, hey, do we have the adequate staff? I don't want to use the word polices this, I'm looking at the sheriff. Who makes sure that these conditions are followed? Steve, Mr. Just.
We work with the attorney's office, and these are subject to compliance review. So I think,
Explain to everyone what a compliance review means.
well, we do an annual inspection. We get the insurance information. We work with the township. You know, the Greenmark Porter facility, they just finished in December, so they haven't done any of the vegetation establishment. Planning and Water, I believe, still has $25,000 in escrow, so they'll be monitored very closely, and so the ground vegetation and the remaining screening will hopefully be in good shape, and potentially they'll get their escrow back by the end of summer. Some of these things take time, you know, certainly was a long winter, and they did finish in December. They wanted to get on with XL before the end of the year, so they had some deadlines and schedules, but clearly there's not a lot you can do with plantings even now.
So you're referring to the Ruts Lake facility that the gentleman and Commissioner Workman is also referring to.
Right, and I guess as far as staffing, you know, my department's relatively small, but we have planning and water and the attorney's office, soil and water conservation district. We do work with the townships, so I think we make good progress, but sometimes it takes time.
When it comes to opacity, I always pronounce that wrong. What is the ordinance? How is that monitored? How is that evaluated?
Well, again, the plastic slats at 8 feet tall provide 100% coverage, 8 feet tall. I guess the point being that if there's a neighbor on a hill, there's never been a requirement that somehow that's evaluated from a 700 to, what, a quarter-mile distance, and whether or not somebody on a hill would be able to see over top. So, I mean, it is certainly an issue and something that's been discussed at length, but people in a higher elevation nearby would never be able to have, you know, sometimes you'd have to have 50-foot screening and it still wouldn't cover it. So that's the reality of some locations.
And one other question for you, Steve. It's been referred to as a highly dense residential area. Is that what Waconia Township is considered?
There's no definition, so I guess that would all be in the eye of the beholder. There has been information in the record about 40-some properties within, is it 3/4 of a mile? That, again, is not something that's defined.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the board? If not, what is the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion, and provided I get a second, then I think we ought to have some discussion. I know that Commissioner Lynch is interested in some discussion, so let's see how it goes. A motion to adopt I'd like to make a motion to adopt the attached findings of the fact and issue an order for PZ 2017-0025 for approval of the conditional use permit.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Maluchnik, seconded by Commissioner Ishii. Any discussion? Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would like to have $800 to the other 7 residents, and they were listed before, and I'm sure staff has them on staff. I know that there's 3 listed. There are 7 requested today, and I'd also like, and I think that the Tools have the most unique situation on the hill, and you can't cover it for $800. So How about if we quadruple it to $3,200?
Was it, what do you call that, tree allowance? Or
Yes.
Tree allowance, $3,200 for the tools, and add 2 more,
I think they agreed for 3, it'd be 4 more.
4 more. 4 more, so a total of 7,
And I believe staff has those on,
just for my own, okay.
and I'm sure, I see Reed nodding, I'm sure he knows who they are too.
Any other discussion? That was not part of the motion at this point. We would have to,
I'm willing to accept that as a friendly amendment, Mr. Chairman.
is a seconder willing to accept that?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. That was now part of the motion. Any other discussion? Commissioner Lynch.
Mr. Chair, how we got here is that the state legislature passed this law, and I think anyone sits up here knows the difficulty that we deal with, and we look out there and we see the people there, and the last thing we want to do is to put you through this. It's kind of like last night, the township meeting, and it was approved on a 2-to-1 vote. I'm sure they wish they didn't have to discuss it, and how the Pines would come, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, that's what they did. They approved it. At the end of the day, I drove by it again this morning. I stopped and I paused, and I still think it's the wrong place to do. But on the other hand, by voting for this, I think that's what it's going to do, is protect the residents as the best we possibly can.
Commissioner Maluchnik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure that the screening that was passed by the township folks is truly implemented in full force. So I know that there's a correction or amendment plan coming from the applicant, and I just want to be sure that that's fully implemented and directed by the board to staff to do that.
Commissioner Lynch's thoughts are well said, well put together. I too drove out there last night, and I didn't stop to talk to anybody specifically because I talked to you on the phone and I expressed my concerns. And I did because, hey, what am I missing here? I just wanted to look at it again. I had a call from the renter, the agricultural person that actually farms the land, and he expressed his concern about the location of this in the field. If it could have been more in the corner, I mean, he's a good farmer, big farmer, you might say. He's got equipment that is going to be very hard to farm the strips along the western border and the northern border. If he could have pushed it more to the corner. My question, has anybody ever reached out and talked to the Kings personally? Maybe there's a reason. Hopefully you have. I see a few heads shaking. Thank you. Good. Hopefully it's easy to make somebody be the bad guy when you don't know where they're coming from. And I'm just happy that you have spoken to the Kings. Like I say, tried, I'm sorry. Because, if it tried and failed, that kind of leads me to another concern. I don't like people trespassing on my land any more than you like people trespassing on your land, but, yeah, I don't want to, okay. The motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes on a 3-2 vote. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, could I clarify the access for the beekeeper? You want staff to draft that and include it in the conditions?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, Steve, that?
I would revise the finding related to the traffic.
Which traffic issue?
The beekeeper was a finding, not a condition. It
Oh,
was a
the
finding
finding,
related
yeah.
to traffic.
Yes.
It's exempted.
We'll revise that.
Yeah.
I got it right.
Item 6.2, USS Ego Solar LLC. Mr. Just, who's taking this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one that was also heard on April 3rd. 1 megawatt facility in section 36 of Benton Township. It's in the Gotha Rural Service District. And the site would be approximately 8 to 9 acres again. And pursuant to the board's direction, an order for approval has been drafted. So we would be looking for a motion to adopt the attached findings of fact and issue order PZ 2018-0003 for the approval of the conditional use permit.
Hearing that, introduce yourself and take it away.
Erica Forsman with U.S. Solar. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to thank you and county staff for the work that you have done on the USS Ego Solar LLC application. As has been stated multiple times, this proposed project is in compliance with the 2030 comp plan. It is an approved land use on this property, and it meets the requirements of section 152.251 of the Carver County Code for a CUP with the specific conditions that staff has drafted. In this case, the application meets the legal requirements for approval. We have met with the Township Board. We've received unanimous approval from the Planning Commission. We've completed individual outreach to neighboring property owners to discuss landscaping and fencing. And finally, we received your positive 4-1 vote at the last board meeting. So today, we respectfully request that you approve this draft motion and issue this conditional use permit. Thank you.
Any questions at this point? If not, is there anybody from the public that would have anything to add that we haven't heard?
Mr. Chairman, there's no one here from the town board, and there's not one resident that lives in that area that's in our audience.
Board, what is your wishes?
With that, Mr. Chair, I would move approval with staff recommendations.
I'd second.
I'd second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made by Commissioner Ishii, seconded by Commissioner Maluchnik to approve the adopted facts and order, facts and findings. Any discussion of that motion?
Steve, had anything to add?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lynch.
I would say that, we talked about this before too, and this is in the RSD, and myself and Commissioner Maluchnik, we sat on a task force some time ago, and the RSD allows for more in industrial use, a different use, not necessarily that would normally not be allowed in the agricultural area. So,
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, motion's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Anything else that should be brought up before we adjourn our meeting and go into a work session to discuss road and bridge CIP and the construction plans for the Coney Island of the West? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn, I second going to work session.
Motion by Commissioner Ishii, seconded by Commissioner Lynch to adjourn and go into work session. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.